The cascading prism crystal fixture above the marble foyer had witnessed 3 murders, 2 betrayals, and countless transactions that could topple governments. But on that frost-brittle February morning, it would witness something far more dangerous. The moment Kang Taejun's carefully constructed empire began to crack from the inside. Kioma Akoy had been polishing the same jade figurine for 15 minutes, her dark fingers moving in practiced circles that had nothing to do with cleaning and everything to do with survival. In the Kang estate, stillness was a language, movement was confession. And right now, the guard Hwang Dishik was confessing violence with every step he took toward her. "You think I don't see you?" Dishik's voice was acid and cigarette smoke. "Watching, always watching with those eyes." Kioma kept her gaze on the figurine, a dragon mid-flight caught forever between earth and heaven. She'd learned in her 8 months here that responding was permission. Silence was the only fortress she owned. But Dishik had decided silence was guilt. His hand cracked across her face with a sound like a branch snapping. The jade dragon tumbled from her fingers and time itself seemed to fracture. Kioma tasted copper, felt the familiar sting that transported her back to Lagos, to her stepfather's house, to every moment she'd ever been powerless. Then came the voice that could freeze blood mid-flow. "Dishik." Kang Taejun stood in the doorway of his study and the temperature in the room plummeted. He wasn't a large man, barely 5'9" in his Italian leather shoes, but he occupied space the way a black hole does, absolutely, crushingly, with a gravity that bent everything toward him. Dishik's face went the color of spoiled milk. "Sir, she was." "On your knees." The guard's legs buckled as if the strings holding him upright had been cut. Taejun walked forward with the measured pace of a man who had never rushed for anything in his life. His suit was charcoal perfection, his silver hair swept back from a face that belonged on ancient coins. At 43, he'd built an empire that stretched from Seoul to Sao Paulo, dealing in everything governments pretended didn't exist. He crouched beside Kioma, and for one vertigo-inducing moment their eyes met. His were obsidian, black enough to drown in, sharp enough to cut. "Did he hurt you?" It wasn't the question that shocked her. It was the way he asked it, as if her answer actually mattered, as if she was something more than the furniture she'd been polishing. "I'm fine, sir." The lie tasted like metal. Taejun's jaw tightened. He stood, turning to Dishik with the casual malice of a man selecting wine. "You've served my family for 6 years. Sir, please." "In that time, I've asked only 3 things: loyalty, discretion, and respect." Taejun's voice could have etched glass. "You failed the third, which makes me question the first 2. "She's just a maid." Dishik's desperation made him stupid. "She's nothing, I was." The gunshot made Kioma's ears ring. Dishik slumped forward, a neat hole in his forehead, shock frozen on his face for eternity. Taejun lowered his pistol, a beautiful, terrible thing with mother-of-pearl inlay, and turned back to Kioma as if he'd just swatted a mosquito. "You'll forgive me," he said quietly. "I have a headache," and his voice was grating. Kioma stared at the body bleeding onto Persian silk. Her mind was a white noise of shock and something else, something that felt horrifyingly like gratitude. "Sir, I clean this up?" He gestured to the jade dragon still intact beside Dishik's lifeless hand. "The figurine, not him. I'll have people for that." He paused, studying her with an intensity that felt like pressure against her skull. "You're from Nigeria?" "Yes, sir, Lagos." "You came here for university?" "Medical school, Yonsei." The words felt absurd emerging from this moment, from this room where death cooled on expensive carpet. "And you're cleaning houses instead?" Something flickered across his face, curiosity perhaps, or calculation. "We'll speak later, go to your quarters." It wasn't a suggestion. Kioma fled, her heartbeat a drum in her throat, the phantom sting of the slap already fatting. But as she climbed the servants' stairs, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed an invisible border into a country with no map, no laws, and no way back. Behind her, Kang Taejun made a single phone call. "The guard is dead, send the cleaners." A pause, "and research everything about the Nigerian girl, everything." He hung up, picked up the jade dragon Kioma had left behind, and smiled. 3 days passed in careful silence. Kioma saw Taejun only in glimpses, a shadow in the hallway, a voice from behind closed doors. The staff whispered theories about Dishik's disappearance. The official story was that he'd been caught stealing and fired. No one believed it. No one dared question it. On the fourth day, she was summoned to Taejun's private study. The room was a temple to controlled chaos, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in Korean, Japanese, English, and Russian, abstract art that probably cost more than small nations, and a desk of black walnut where Taejun sat like a king granting audience. Sit, he gestured to a chair that looked designed to make visitors feel small. Kioma sat spine straight, hands folded, survival mode. Kioma Akoi, he pronounced her name perfectly, each syllable respected. 26 years old, full scholarship to Yonsei Medical School, third in your class first year. He slid a folder across the desk, her entire life reduced to paperwork. Then something happened, you dropped out, started working illegally, I might add, as domestic help. Why? Her throat tightened. Personal reasons, sir. Your student visa expired 4 months ago, you're here illegally, working under a false name. He leaned back, fingers steepled. I could have you deported with a phone call. Terror flooded her veins, cold and clarifying. Please. I'm not going to, he cut her off with surgical precision. I'm going to offer you something instead, but first I need to know what happened, and I'll know if you're lying. The lie she'd lived with for 2 years sat behind her teeth, bitter and familiar. But something about the way Taejun watched her, not predatory but genuinely curious, made the truth claw its way out. My mother got sick, kidney failure, the treatment in Nigeria, she swallowed. I sent everything I had, sold everything, it wasn't enough, I took a loan from the wrong people. How much? 47 million won, nearly $40,000, it might as well have been 40 million. And they want it back with interest. They want me? The admission felt like skinning herself alive. They gave me 6 months, I have 2 left, if I don't pay they take me back to Lagos. Force me to work for them, trafficking, the word tasted like grave dirt. Taejun was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, your mother. She died 3 months ago. I'm sorry. The condolences from a killer should have felt obscene. Instead, they felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to her in months. I'll pay your debt, Taejun said simply. Kioma's breath caught. What? All of it, plus enough to regularize your immigration status and restart medical school. He said it the way someone might offer coffee. In exchange, you work for me. As a maid, confusion made her stupid. As a doctor? He pulled out another folder, this one thicker. I run an organization that operates outside conventional law. My people get hurt. They can't go to hospitals without questions. I need someone smart, discreet, and desperate enough to cross lines. You want me to patch up criminals? I want you to save lives that society has decided don't deserve saving. He met her eyes. You can refuse, I'll still handle your debt, but you'll never practice medicine in Korea otherwise. The loan sharks have connections, you'll run forever. It was a devil's bargain wrapped in silk. Kioma thought of her mother's last words, you were meant to heal people, Kioma, don't let the world steal that from you. Why me, she asked, you could hire anyone. Because when Dishik hit you, you didn't cry, you didn't beg, you calculated. Taejun's smile was sharp as wire. Because you've spent 2 years surviving in a foreign country, working illegal jobs, dodging deportation and loan sharks, that takes a particular kind of strength. He paused. And because when I killed a man in front of you, you thanked me with your eyes. The accusation landed like a punch, because it was true. I'm not a good person, Kioma, but I'm honest about what I am. He pushed a contract across the desk. 3 years, you work exclusively for me, I pay for everything, school, housing, security, your debt disappears. After 3 years you're free, no strings. And if I say no? Then you say no, the debt still disappears, but you'll always wonder what you could have become. Kioma picked up the contract with trembling fingers. The terms were shockingly fair, almost generous, which meant there was a catch she couldn't see yet. But what choice did choice ever really mean when all paths led through darkness? She signed. Taejun's smile was a blade-catching light. Welcome to the family, Dr. Akoi. Medical school the second time around was different. Kioma attended classes during the day, her tuition paid by a merit scholarship that no one questioned. At night, she descended into Taejun's underworld. Her first patient was a man named June who'd been stabbed during a territory dispute. He bled out on Taejun's kitchen table while she fought to remember everything she'd learned about emergency surgery. Her hands shook. The blood was so much redder than textbooks suggested. Focus, Taejun's voice cut through her panic. He stood beside her, perfectly calm, handing her instruments like a surgical nurse. The hepatic artery, clamp it. She did. June lived. That night she vomited until her ribs ached. Taejun waited outside the bathroom, then handed her water and said nothing. The silence felt like understanding. The second patient was easier, the fifth was almost routine. By the 20th she'd stopped counting. But Taejun wasn't just making her a doctor, he was making her something else. "You need to understand the world you're part of now," he said one evening, leading her through a warehouse where men sorted through shipping containers. "This isn't random violence, it's an ecosystem." He showed her the money laundering operations hidden inside legitimate businesses, the protection rackets that kept neighborhoods safer than police ever could, the weapons shipments that armed resistance fighters in countries whose names never made the news. "We're not heroes," Taejun said, "but we're not the villains the law pretends we are. We're the gray space where the real world lives." Kioma watched him negotiate with a Russian arms dealer, switching languages like clothes, his mind moving 10 steps ahead of everyone else. He was terrifying, he was fascinating. And he was teaching her to be the same. "Why are you doing this?" she asked one night after stitching up a teenager who'd been shot protecting his sister from a gang. "You could just use me, keep me ignorant, why educate me?" Taejun looked up from the papers he was reviewing. "Because ignorant tools break, informed partners last." He set down his pen. "And because I see something in you that most people miss." "What?" "The same thing that's in me, the capacity to do terrible things for the right reasons." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's rare and precious." Months blurred together, Kioma's skills sharpened. She could now perform emergency surgery in abandoned buildings, diagnose by flashlight, treat gunshot wounds, stab wounds, poisonings. She learned which authorities could be bribed, which hospitals didn't ask questions, which pharmacies would fill prescriptions without IDs. She also learned about Taejun. How he'd built his empire from nothing after his family was murdered by a rival gang. How every decision was calculated 3 moves ahead. How he never forgot a debt owed or owing. How he read philosophy in 4 languages and could quote Seneca while ordering executions. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked once. "This life?" "Regret is for people who had choices." He poured them both whiskey, expensive, smoky, probably illegal. "I had survival, everything else came after." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer that matters." He met her eyes. "Do you regret signing with me?" Kioma thought about her mother's grave she'd finally been able to visit and decorate properly, about the medical textbooks she could now afford, about feeling useful again, important, needed. About the way her heart jumped when Taejun said her name. "No," she said, "I don't." His expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his face before being locked away. "Good, because I have a problem and you're the only one I trust to help me solve it." The problem walked into Taejun's office 3 days later wearing a designer suit and carrying the smile of someone who'd never been told no. Cousin, Kang Seo Hwanseok was everything Taejun wasn't: loud, charming, reckless. "You're looking well, tyranny agrees with you." Seo Hwanseok, Taejun's voice could have frozen fire. "You're early, I wasn't expecting you until the board meeting. I thought I'd get a preview of the empire I'm about to inherit." Seo Hwanseok sprawled in a chair like he owned it. His eyes found Kioma standing in the corner reviewing medical charts. "And who's this new flavor of the month?" Kioma felt Taejun go dangerously still. "Dr. Akoy is my personal physician, show respect or leave." Seo Hwanseok raised his hands in mock surrender. "Touchy, I'm just making conversation." But his eyes stripped her down in a way that made her skin crawl. After he left, Taejun poured himself a drink, a tell that meant he was more rattled than he'd shown. "That was my cousin, he's been positioning himself to take over the organization." "Can he?" "There's a board meeting in 2 weeks, the elders will decide succession." Tae-jun stared into his glass. I have no children, no direct heirs. Koh Won-seok is blood. By traditional law, he has the stronger claim. But you built this. And he'll destroy it. Tae-jun's voice was flat. He's impulsive, greedy, stupid. Everything I've built, the alliances, the balance, the code, he'll burn it for short-term profit. People will die, good people. Kioma understood what he wasn't saying. You need leverage. I need proof that he's unfit, concrete proof the elders can't ignore. He looked at her, and I need someone he'll underestimate to get it. Over the next 10 days, Kioma became someone else. Koh Won-seok liked to party at exclusive clubs, liked young women, liked to brag when drunk. She became the medical student who accidentally bumped into him at a bar, who laughed at his jokes, who seemed dazzled by his wealth and power. It made her skin crawl, but she'd learned to separate herself from her body when necessary, a skill learned long before Korea. On the fifth night, drunk on his own ego and expensive champagne, Koh Won-seok confessed everything. How he'd been embezzling from the organization for years. How he'd made a deal with a rival syndicate to betray Tae-jun the moment he took power. How he'd orchestrated attacks blamed on other gangs to make Tae-jun look weak. Kioma recorded it all on a device so small it was hidden in her necklace. But Koh Won-seok wasn't completely stupid. As she made excuses to leave, his hand clamped on her wrist. You're very curious, he said, smile gone, very interested in business, almost like you're working for someone. I'm just fascinated by you, she tried, but her voice shook. Liar, he twisted her wrist until she gasped. Does my cousin think I'm an idiot? Did he send his little pet to spy on me? Kioma calculated distances, exits, weapons. Her medical bag had a scalpel, his guards were outside, the odds were impossible. Then the door exploded inward. Tae-jun moved like violence personified. He shot both guards before they could reach for weapons, then put his gun against Koh Won-seok's temple with the casual precision of long practice. Let her go. Koh Won-seok released her wrist. You'll start a war over a whore. The gun's report was deafening in the closed room. Koh Won-seok crumpled, screaming, clutching his kneecap. She is under my protection, that makes her untouchable. Tae-jun's voice was winter itself, the recording. Kioma nodded, still shaking. Good, he hauled Koh Won-seok up by his collar. You're going to the elders, you're going to confess everything. If you don't, I'll send them pieces of you until there's nothing left to bury. The board meeting lasted 4 hours. Kioma wasn't allowed inside, but she heard the shouting. Heard Koh Won-seok's confession forced out through gritted teeth. Heard the elders' verdict, exile and disgrace or death. Koh Won-seok chose exile. When Tae-jun emerged, he looked exhausted in a way she'd never seen, worn down to the bone. He found her waiting in the hallway. Thank you, he said quietly, you saved everything. You saved me first, she replied. That day with the guard, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. His eyes held something raw and honest. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were going to change everything. The air between them crackled with unspoken things. Sorry. Tae-jun, he corrected. When we're alone, call me Tae-jun. Tae-jun, she tested it, the syllables strange and intimate. What happens now? Now we rebuild better than before. He stepped closer, close enough she could see the silver threading through his temples, the scar along his jaw. If you'll stay. My contract has 2 years left. Forget the contract? His hand rose, hesitated, then gently touched her cheek where Dishik had struck her months ago. The bruise was long gone, but the memory remained. Stay because you want to, leave if you don't, I'll honor either choice. Kioma thought about Lagos, about medical school, about the normal life she'd once imagined. Then she thought about the rush of saving lives in impossible circumstances, about building something meaningful in the margins, about the way this terrible, brilliant man looked at her like she was his equal. She took his hand. I'll stay. His smile could have melted steel. 2 years later, Dr. Kioma Akoy graduated top of her class. Tae-jun attended the ceremony in the back row, anonymous in sunglasses, pride written across every line of his body. That night, they celebrated in his private dining room with the kind of expensive wine she'd once only seen in magazines. To the newest doctor in Seoul, he toasted. To the most terrifying mafia boss in Asia, she countered. They drank, laughed, and for a moment felt almost normal. The organization had changed under their joint leadership. Kioma had pushed for reforms, better treatment of the lowest workers, actual support networks, medical care for everyone. Taejun had listened, adapted, implemented. He'd created a health clinic in one of Seoul's poorest neighborhoods, staffed by doctors who didn't ask questions and funded by money laundered through so many legitimate businesses it came out clean. They saved lives during the day and made calculated violence at night. It was morally complicated. It was possibly wrong. It was the only thing that made sense anymore. I need to tell you something, Taejun said, his tone shifting to serious. They were on his penthouse balcony, the city sprawling below them like scattered stars. The elders approached me, they want me to marry. Kioma's heart dropped. I see. For alliance, for legitimacy, for heirs. He wouldn't look at her. It's expected, traditional. Of course, she kept her voice steady through sheer will. That makes sense. I told them no. Her breath caught. What? I told them I had other plans. Now he turned, his obsidian eyes catching moonlight. I told them I intended to marry a Nigerian doctor who's far too good for me if she'll have me. Kioma stared at him. That's you can't, the elders will never. The elders serve me, not the other way around. I've spent 20 years building this empire, I'll run it how I choose. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, black diamond surrounded by traditional Korean jade. I'm not asking you to fit into my world. I'm asking if we can build a new one together. Taejun, tears pricked her eyes. This is insane. Yes, he smiled. Do you want to do it anyway? She thought about the girl who'd arrived in Korea with dreams of healing, who'd been broken down and built back up into something sharper. She thought about the man who'd killed for her, trusted her, truly seen her, in a world that usually looked through people like her. She thought about love that grew in the cracks of broken things, that thrived despite impossible odds. Yes, she said, yes, I'll marry you. The wedding was small, a fusion of Nigerian and Korean traditions that broke every rule and followed its own logic. Kioma wore her mother's beads and Korean silk. Taejun spoke his vows in English, Korean, and Igbo, which he'd secretly learned for the occasion. The elders were scandalized, the organization buzzed with gossip, neither of them cared. 5 years after that, the Kangakoi Foundation opened its 10th free clinic. Kioma ran the medical operations while Taejun handled the politics and funding. They laundered money through healing. They built legitimacy through care. It wasn't redemption, neither of them believed in that fairy tale, but it was something better, transformation, taking what they were and making it useful. On a spring morning, Kioma found Taejun in his study, staring at the jade dragon he'd kept from that first day. Do you ever think about him? She asked, D-Shik. Sometimes, he set down the figurine. I think about the moment before I pulled the trigger, how easy it was. Does it bother you? Does that bother you? Kioma considered. She thought about the lives she'd saved, the people she'd helped, the empire of unlikely good they'd built from blood money and second chances. She thought about the moral calculations she made every day, the lines she'd learned to walk. No, she said honestly, not anymore. Their daughter, born the previous year, named Amara Haijin for both her grandmothers, started crying from the nursery. Kioma went to get her, lifted her up, showed her the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Someday, she told her daughter, we'll tell you about how we met, about the worst day that became the best decision, about building something beautiful from broken pieces. Taejun joined them, wrapped his arms around them both. A killer, a healer, and the impossible future they'd created. Below them, Seoul glittered. Above them, stars judged or didn't. And in the space between, they built their empire of scars into something that looked almost like hope. In the end, that slap had changed everything. Violence had led to protection, debt to partnership, survival to love. It wasn't the story either of them would have written, but it was theirs. And it was enough.